How did you become general counsel so fast in your career?
Gosh, if I don't have that, why am I here? So what's nice about the deal world was that when both sides are a little bit disgruntled at the end, you probably had a good deal. People want to know about what I did at the Dodgers as my first job out of out of college. And this is a sales and hospitality job. This has nothing to do, in theory, with being a lawyer. But I think it has a lot to do with being a good business person, because this is where you're learning the humility that it takes to serve the customer.
So a speeding ticket better than a parking fine.
Be mindful of getting complacent. Life's too short to just be doing something that you think is mediocre.
Where's the money? The money's in the law firms or in-house?
I also can't say that one lifestyle is harder than the other, because you're always going to have a boss, and that boss is probably going to be demanding,
Kim Nakamaru, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Kim, I've seen your journey, how you progressed to start your career in the hospitality industry, moved on to work in law firms, and now General Counsel at Relativity Space. How did you become General Counsel so fast in your career?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to a combination of opportunity arising and being prepared to meet that opportunity. I think most professionals would say they got to where they were not because they planned it that way necessarily, or because they had some sequence they had in mind coming out the gate, say coming out of law school. But I would say that specifically my first general counsel role came as a result of, one, the opportunity was the former general counsel left, and his predecessor had also, he had trained me quite well and put me in the right rooms to be in with the executive team and the board. Even if I wasn't the primary lawyer advising them, I was at least there and they knew who I was. And so that was strategic on his part and on mine. And part of my brand too is I will make sure that I'm in the room in lots of ways. And, that's an art, because you can also overstay that. You could push yourself into a room and you shouldn't actually be there, and it's not the right approach. But there are several opportunities at that company where it looked like an opportunity for me to actually provide value, or at least, have something to say. It would be my project, for example. And the general counsel gave me an opportunity to present my own work. And that was a lesson that I've taken to date, and I do with joy for my team. It's not a matter of my ego wanting to be the one looked at as a boss. You are the general counsel. You are, in fact, the boss. But how could we give our teams the opportunity to make an impression that might serve them later in their career? And for me, it happened to be at that actual company when he took a different opportunity. And then the board and the CEO said, maybe you wouldn't have been on our dance card because, they didn't say it quite that way. But, if they had done their own hiring, I probably wouldn't have been the profile. But even though we did go through an executive search for the open GC role, I did have relationships with the executive team and the board at that point, and had the trust of the team. So that's where I think some preparation and some intentionality mixed with the right opportunity added up to being able to ascend to that role quickly, or quicker than potentially being somewhere else. And one thing I'd also add to, just, because I know that the audience might be people earlier in their careers thinking about transitions and growth, is I purposely chose a company, my first in-house company, to be a mid-sized company. And I was at a large law firm, and I was not interested in being in a big company where it felt like another law firm, where I'd be one of 20 corporate lawyers in the machine. And so the recruiter that brought me out of my law firm knew that about me, that I wanted something small enough where good, smart people would rise and be noticed and make a difference. I think that was my North Star. And then at the same time, not so small, though, that you didn't have good lawyers and good business people to learn from. So my first opportunity purposefully was kind of this 1,000 to 2,000 people, but not being so far away from the sun such that no one knows who you are.
Brilliant. How did you get this clarity that this is what you want? Like mid-sized company, 1,000, 2,000 people. Most lawyers do not have even clarity which law to pursue. Should they pursue IP, family law, corporate litigation? They are juggling between so many types of laws. How can a lawyer get clarity about what should they be pursuing?
I think you have to, this is where intentionality does come in. So from a really early stage, let's say my first role out of law school was clerking for one of the senior judges over in the Central District. And I talked with him a lot about his path, and he introduced me to people in the legal community and the business community. And you're always asking the questions. I don't have any lawyers in the family, so I had no idea even what going from what a clerkship was, what a law firm would be like. And so there was a lot of proactivity that I think if you don't come from a background that knows a thing or two about the practice of law, that you really have to make the time to be intellectually curious about your path. And so I took that same ethos into my law firm where you talk to I was purposely looking for a law firm where they would give me a broad range of opportunities. And here's the intentional part of the story here is where I had identified a partner who had a practice that was interesting to me. And his name's Richard Grant. He still practices at McGuireWoods. He has a broad-based corporate M&A private equity background, but he also just so happened to have a sports practice, which was very interesting to me. And so through conversations with him, and I emailed him cold and said, I'm finishing my clerkship in a year. Should you have opportunities, I would love to be considered. He's busy. He didn't write back. But then over a year later, maybe a year and a half, I heard from the HR department because lo and behold, his associate had left. And he remembered that inbound I sent the prior year that was very much a, hey, I saw an article that you wrote. I'm interested in your practice. There's a lot of specific as to why I was interested in talking with him. He invited me to have, a conversation, and the rest is history. But it was very apparent to me that he was somebody who, not only had the sway within the firm to do this, but had the mindset of, okay, I will teach you the craft, but there's other parts of this otherwise large firm that you might be interested in leveraging your skills within. And so this was a big firm based on the East Coast. The LA office was about 70 to 100 attorneys at the time. So still not small, but small enough. Same thesis, small enough where, oh, I happen to make relationship in the lunchroom with one of the key real estate partners. Can I do some work with you when I have time? Oh, we sat next door to the finance partners. What are you working on? Like, how could I learn that? Oh, it's, 2013, who I don't know anybody from a business development perspective other than young founders. Oh, guess what? These young founders need their first time GC because they can't afford it. So what would it look like to be doing that pro bono? So you can kind of see how there is a theme about the types of broad opportunities that I'm creating. But also, like, that was also some opportunity and some luck too that I ended up there. And so then, yes, going into the law firm, from the law firm into an in-house role, I had at that point spoken to enough people, and this is also including recruiters who can kind of tell you about what an in-house position is even like at all. Because I had no idea. I just had heard the common thing young associates here in law firms is, oh, in-house life so much easier. And that's, I think, the main, they're like, oh, I'll work here for 2 years and leave for in-house. But like, why? I don't know why. And I think that's a fallacy too, to think that in-house life is easier. You don't bill hours, so there's a difference there, but it's a different kind of busy. And I think you just have to talk. You just, bottom line, have to talk to people who are doing the job. And, you don't even need to call it networking. Networking is this dirty word that people cringe when they hear it, but it's just forming relationships.
Brilliant. I think that's a great piece of advice, Kim. Talk to a lot of people, understand what they are doing, and then decide what's right for you. Because only then, once you have enough knowledge, you can make a wise decision on where to go, what field to choose, and how to go forward with your career.
That's right.
How do good lawyers become great general counsels?
That's a great question. I appreciate that because I think there's also some misconception out there that, oh, I have to stay at a law firm and ascend to the ranks of partnership, and then I am expert enough. I'm a good enough lawyer to then, either, I don't know about be a GC right away, but make the leap then. And while I do very much believe that foundational training in a law firm is very important, I do believe that that's a great thing to do. If you have the opportunity to do that for more than 1 year, I would say, certainly, and mid-level or above. I think the key to becoming the general counsel from whether it's from a law firm or from in-house is or your question was what makes a great one? A great one is one that is a strategic advisor to the business, and that starts implicating skills that are not purely legal skills. By the time you're being considered for general counsel, it is table stakes that your CEO or executive team member already believes that you're probably pretty good at being a lawyer. But what separates people having a great lawyer in the room from being a strategic GC, and frankly, I think a lot of people, even on executive teams, don't know what that distinction is. They hear the term strategic business partner, but what does that look like? Some people think what that looks like is, oh, just continue to do more contracts or just the person actually doing the work, but with a C title. But what I believe that really means is, no, you wanna be the one sitting with your executive team, talking about an issue, not even a legal issue, and everyone's bringing to bear their particular perspective. I might be coming predominantly from a legal perspective, and I would expect that my board and executive team would want that from me. But I also look for teams that are gonna ask your opinion about something because you're a good thinker. And so that's where, where we're in black and white. That's where lawyers are paid for our judgment. And our judgment isn't being able to ask ChatGPT what the law is and check it, but it is in the nuance and when there's play in the joints about which way are we going to go. What's your recommendation? Do you have a perspective? What's your point of view? I think that really distinguish a great GC from one who's just doing more at a higher level.
Interesting. And was any of that taught to you in the law school?
Not law school, although I will credit Loyola with being practical in the way that they train lawyers on the transactional side.
Uh-huh.
In law school, you're also in an echo chamber where everybody thinks that they know what path is the optimal path. But unfortunately, most law schools, probably due to the bar exam, are geared a lot towards litigation and, writing a memorandum a certain way and citing law and then doing your analysis. And that's very important. And I was a federal law clerk, so that was very important there. But it's not something that you can necessarily learn from a book. And so I think a lot of law schools these days are catching on to that fact. And even some of the, T14, if you will, are even seeing that potentially is a missing part of the curriculum to have more of these practicum types. On the litigation side, you have moot court and you have a lot of negotiations, but there has historically not been things like that on the corporate transaction side. And I'm also not arguing that being a transactional lawyer is the only or best path to being general counsel. I don't think that's true. It happens to be mine. But either way, getting to be in a situation where there's an unclear business decision that needs to be made, and then how are you helping the people in the room kind of hone in on what the best outcome is in light of the risk tolerance of the business, in light of the commercial realities, in light of whatever it is that your board and executive team believes are the North Stars of your business. Those are the things that you're kind of orienting around. So no, it's not from a textbook or from law school, but I think a lot of people bring to bear all their life experience here, where having high emotional intelligence is, I think, an undervalued often skill that in an executive boardroom. And when you see it, though, you see why it matters. Because then it's people that aren't just like thinking about their narrow lane and coming at it from one angle. They're people that are understanding the players in the room. They're understanding the external players that are involved and all of the different nuances in each and being able to navigate the chessboards on the pieces on the table. So that I think can come from non-legal experience before law school. That can come from, having seen a lot of different type of jobs. It could be like if you are only in a law firm, and you can see it there too. You've seen lots of different client scenarios on the litigation side and the transaction side. So it's being attuned to like what is mattering to your stakeholders is what is a specific skill I would point to.
So and what's the plan? You enterprise AI, a lot of companies now launching enterprise AI. Do you think with enterprise AI, lawyers like yourself and your team can accommodate more work in-house and they will be outsourcing less work to outside counsel? Is that going to be a trend?
Yeah, so I love this topic actually because in some ways overplayed, but I have a perspective on this. So I don't think, for one thing, from a will AI take lawyers' jobs perspective, I don't think that's true. I think perhaps at the junior level, if you have a fixed mindset about what legal work is and where lawyers add value, perhaps if you want to do document review for the rest of your life, then sure. But if you have a growth mindset, no matter what level of lawyer you are, then like you're going to see it as something that's going to supplement your strategic abilities as opposed to replace it, because that's the part that's not replaceable. This part in the gray, we talked about being a strategic business partner. That part of the GC or lawyer's role is never going away. And in fact, it excites me, and I think it opens a lot of different types of GC opportunities for different kind of candidates. For example, being the first lawyer in the door. That used to be something that would be really intimidating to lots of people, because they might think, oh, I don't have the breadth of experience to be able to be the fingers on the keyboard person for this team if their expectation is I'm the only lawyer. But when you think of some of these AI tools now that are pretty good at legal research and some of these briefings that can take down the time, and you then could take that work, which is more like junior lawyer work, and then advise on the basis of that, then it's more of a pressure testing your strategy use case than it is a replacing or a kind of regurgitating AI and then delivering it to your CEO. It's more, hey, this is the strategy that I have in mind. Like, AI, please pressure test this and tell me the things I'm missing.
Mm.
And I think it'll super, no matter how brilliant or how experienced a lawyer or business person is, I think you can always served to be asking those questions about what am I missing? AI, think about this from the perspective of an investor. What would that person be asking based on what you're seeing here?
Brilliant. And Kim, if suppose in the world of AI, if you were a fresh graduate and you had to restart your career in 2026, and you moved out of law school, you're just a fresh graduate, 2026, you're graduating. How would you redo your career in 2026?
My own personal one?
Yes.
Yeah. How would I redo it? So I think, first of all, AI and the tech adoption piece, I think that 2026, there's no doubt, like you have to have some degree of fluency in that. And I go back to being a student of the game and, talking to a lot of people as a theme from before. And I think being a student of the game is really important, especially now. And it's always important, but right now I'm doing it with AI, because none of us, as much as you might see on LinkedIn, people here or there claim to be the AI experts, we're all learning on the fly. Yes, it seems like the biggest technological change in decades, and it is. But when I think about tech change, also, it's no different than the freak out everyone had when email first came out, or when the internet started. And so, even though it's a different technology tool, it is nevertheless just a disruptive tool. And so, a lot of these same legal thinking frameworks are the same, whether you're thinking about what are the risks related to the early adoption of the internet versus what are the risks related to the infancy of AI. And so, in that case, I think it's being a student of history. It's being a student of, like, what is this technology, and actually engaging and using it is really important. Because how are you going to then, as a new 2026 grad, credibly try to advise people on this technology or on, the state of affairs now, if you don't actually use the tool yourself?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, we touched upon a subject of where becoming a general counsel in a in-house corporation versus becoming a partner in a law firm. How can a young lawyer choose a path?
I think a young lawyer should be thinking about, like, what are the things that bring you professional joy or personal joy. Just I don't like to separate those two things, because I think it's the same for me in lots of ways. And I can only speak to M&A path, because that's what I was on in the law firm. And I knew that, having made lots of relationships within my law firm and seeing what partners do, what I saw there, and as an M&A lawyer, you're doing a high volume of deals. You're doing lots of deals. When the deal is over and you bought, sold, merged the company, you're on to the next one. So it's more of a mercenary type of mindset with respect to closing transactions. I loved that. I love that because I'm an athlete. I loved the thrill of the hunt and getting kind of in deal mode where you are hunkered down trying to win something for, you know, several months, but then there's usually this time when you're closing it, and that rush is really thrilling.
Mm.
And what's nice about the deal world was that, when both sides are a little bit disgruntled at the end, you probably had a good deal because, neither person like feel like everyone feels a little bit had, but equally that probably means you had a good deal. But anyways, and then you're on to the next thing. And so you're kind of getting this hit and you're getting to see tons and tons of different kinds of companies, which is really cool. So that right there is a way that you're developing a broad skill set in the context of a law firm. You're just gonna bring different issues to bear and seeing that different businesses in different ways. But for me, that was less exciting than the concept of what happens once, like post that, like once the M&A transaction is consummated. What's actually happening to those executives that you just negotiated their new employment agreements, or to this company that you doubled in size and tried to merge 3 different cultures to? And that was actually a big reason I went to my first company. They had just underwent a doubling of the market cap, probably quadrupling of their footprint in the world. And it was a big integration story. And I was joining right at a time when I was very fresh. And so for me, what I learned from that experience was that I did love being boots on the ground, like helping the business through that every day. Where I like the idea of everybody being on the same team and rowing in the same direction for the same goal, and that you're on this journey together. So that's a very like philosophical difference. And again, like from talking to people, I think that's how people start to suss out whether that's which one of those 2 paths is more appealing to them.
Yeah.
Because I think most people that are probably pursuing these types of, if you're thinking about being a law firm partner or a GC, you're probably a high-performing person. So a high-performing person is going to be successful in either path. It's more like, what is it going to get you out of bed every day? And like, what's going to feel meaningful to you in the end, which I think, especially when you get past those early years of your career, that's like really what matters.
Brilliant. And where's the money? The money's in the law firms or in-house?
That depends. That
Okay.
depends. Yeah. And then there's lots of different trade-offs too. And because we could probably spend a whole podcast talking about the different compensation pieces when it comes to an in-house role. And by the way, they're all different. The public company compensation package looks different than the private equity one, which looks different than the venture one.
Mhm.
So these are considerations.
Okay.
Like, what is your risk appetite too?
Mhm.
Like your early stage startup or your startup could be gone tomorrow, but equally that upside could be orders of magnitude beyond what, like, look at SpaceX, by the way, right? It's like
Mhm.
people are talking about $1.5 trillion valuation at IPO. So, so I'm sure those folks, early SpaceX people, are doing quite well, or even not even early SpaceX. So that could easily outpace what a partner in a law firm is making. But then you also have partners in law firms who are double-digit $1 million easily. So it depends, and it depends on I also can't say that one lifestyle is harder than the other, because you're always going to have a boss, and that boss is probably going to be demanding. So so I think it would be a fallacy to think, oh, if I go in-house, then suddenly I don't have to jump every time the client is pinging me at 11:30 p.m. It's like, no, you just have a different client. That client might be a board member, that client probably your CEO. So it's a different flavor of a similar life pattern.
Brilliant. That's a great tip, Kim. Kim, tell us about, do you think lawyers in the US are paying too much for their money? What basically means that making too many sacrifices. I mean, let's say for a missing a birthday party of the kid or missing an important event of your spouse, are lawyers paying too much for their money in the US?
I think we need to break that down, because I think it is pretty easy to say yes to that as a generality, because you hear a lot of stories like that. But this goes back to intentionality too. And I think would be a key attribute of how I've navigated my career too, including the law firm and including my clerkship too, not only my in-house roles. You have a choice in who you're, in the foxhole, if you will, in the war with on your team. And that includes like how you, when you're interviewing for something, who your boss is. Like, what is the culture there? Yeah, if you're going to a major law firm that has a certain reputation, like unless for some reason your boss has a lot of sway in the firm and is going to be your air cover, like you can probably know what that life is going to be like. In your early years, like arguably worth it. Because if those hours are spent actually spending at the knee of more experienced lawyers, if you will, meaning I don't know if just spending more hours churning out more documents is what's going to make you better. I mean, certainly don't do low amount of deal volume. That would probably make you not good. But are you actually learning? Are you spending that time going to lunch with the partner next door and figuring out like what makes him or her click and why they're good at their job, like all of those things. So those are hours well spent, and you better be spending that time when you're early in your career. And I would argue forever. You should be, this is a lifelong journey of learning, right? So I think, I guess generalization would be yes, but then there's so many different ways that you can practice law that, again, having those conversations matters so much because I probably haven't even scratched the surface of what people could do in the law. And because I have had all intense jobs, I am also an intense person, but I also have always worked for people who respect that I have a family, that I have other passions outside of being in the office. And so you kind of can control for that to a certain degree. And then understand that there's always going to be a time you're signing up. If you're going to be GC, you're signing up to bust up your weekends every once in a while. If you're going through a major transaction, those might be multiple weekends in a row. But that's not all the time. And make sure that you're orienting your life in a way, whether it's your support system with your family, however it is, whatever is important to you, make sure those things are taken care of. And then the answer to that isn't going to be a yes, lawyers are certainly overpaying on their life, because I don't think that's always true. And I wouldn't say that it's true for me.
Okay, brilliant. And if the younger lawyers who are watching this show, what mistakes did you make in your career that we can learn from?
And we all make mistakes aplenty. That's a harder one. Because I had actually a pretty non-traditional path when I think about pathways. Um, I don't regret going to big law or clerking the way I did, although we can probably spend some time talking about some of those things. I think lawyers would be interested in that path. Um, I think a mindset mistake in law school is thinking that there is one route. I think the echo chamber tells you that you get good grades for the purpose of getting into big law, getting potentially a federal clerkship and going into big law, and then you're set for life. And I think that just gives such a disservice to the breadth and richness that the practice of law can bring across all different sorts of industries and types of ways of practice. Because then you can take people who have such gifts and passions for, like, people enter law school for lots of different reasons. And for a lot of people, the theme is I want to make a difference. I want to, bring justice. But then this single track mind and the echo chamber takes over, and you think that the only thing that's so-called worthwhile is getting an on-campus interview at insert, elite law firm here. And then you have this mindset of, gosh, if I don't have that, why am I here? Gosh, I must have failed.
That's
And
because maybe
yeah,
lawyers are spending too much on the education. The JD is expensive, and
yeah,
they have student loans and stuff, so they want to make a lot of money back.
yeah.
And that somehow, therefore, does that dilute the whole purpose of being a lawyer?
I think that's a huge thing. I
Mm.
mean, the judge I clerked for, Spencer Lutz, he had a whole, we spent so much time talking about the nature of the legal industry. He's someone actually who is not a litigator, who was a corporate M&A lawyer in private practice, who became a general counsel, and then got appointed to the federal bench. So I don't know if there's anyone with that background. And that was in large part why I was very attracted to working for him. He is very influential in my subsequent path and ethos I bring to my practice. And he and I would talk about how law schools might be getting it wrong, in terms of if this is the way you're teaching to a test, how are you surprised then that you are then producing lawyers that can only think a certain way, who are used to being rewarded for the output and for the right answer? And you do have less lawyers who are very comfortable solving something creatively, being not black or white, because that's not necessarily what's rewarded per se in a law school or in the bar type of settings. So
Hmm.
yes, if the opportunity cost was better calibrated and people didn't feel like they had to make the money back, because I think that's a reality. And it's an expensive thing, and not everyone's getting some sort of scholarship or is fortunate to come from a family that paid for their education. So I don't blame people for wanting to or let's say needing to get the highest paying job that they possibly can. But then the question becomes, do you have the courage to take the golden handcuffs off? So that becomes your meta topic about, okay, have you set your life up in a way that you actually will have the freedom someday to not be beholden to the salary you're making as a second year associate in a large law firm, and that you are willing to step out in boldness to do something that you originally went to law school to do? I think that's the bigger question. That's really more like the test of like what you're made out of and what matters. And that's why I also think that young people should take a lot of time to think about that type of decision before going to law school. Like,
Hmm.
do you want to be a lawyer and why? Because
Brilliant.
that's gonna get you through the hard times.
Why is very important. Kim,
Yep.
tell us, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah. Younger self, someone gave me this actual advice, so I would give it to myself again. So when I would say that, especially if you're in a situation where and be very specific, in a boardroom, you're often the only lawyer in the room, or at least the GC is the only lawyer for the company. Usually, it might be outside counsel, but you are the lawyer in the room for the purpose of that board meeting. And early in your career, if that's your first time, that's going to be very scary, because you're thinking like, I'm going to need to be able to answer every question and sound good, be impressive. But someone told me once, they said, you know what though? All those people are very impressive business people, the luminaries in these extra wide field in this town. But you're literally the only lawyer. And when it comes to the subject matter that you are presenting on and that you are advising on, you're the most expert in your field in that sense. It doesn't matter that you're 34 years old. And that really has stuck with me always, because there's times through a, a career, no matter if you're young or more advanced in your career, where you're going to sit there thinking that you need to have all of the answers and that you're going to be self-conscious about being in an industry that you don't know. But when it comes to the core of what you're in that room for, it's usually transcends like either that industry or the business people's experience. Is like, if you're being asked to be the lawyer, you are the one who knows more than everyone else in that room on that point. And so kind of like speaking truth to yourself on that is something that has been a good reminder whenever I would feel the imposter syndrome creeping in.
Hmm. Brilliant. Kim, what is success for you?
Well, that is a very meta comment. And success to me is feeling like I've made a difference. And I would say that in both a professional and personal sense. I think we've all been given gifts, and I think it's our obligation as humans to use our gifts to their highest and best use. And I feel very fortunate. So on the professional side, I feel very fortunate that I've been afforded the opportunity to become a lawyer, to be a member of the bar, and to have sworn oaths accordingly. Right. And I think it's really easy to forget that as you go through your career and going through your day to day. But it's a privilege to practice the law and to be a member of the bar. And I don't ever want to lose sight of that. And so being able to, use that for the benefit of businesses making a difference in this world, or for a legal team or the individuals on a legal or a business team who you're in charge of their career, I think that's an incredible privilege, and people should feel the weight of that.
Hmm.
And to me, success is, if I have teammates that go on to things that actually make their heart sing and that they feel like they've been put on earth to do, like that's successful to me.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Beautiful. Uh, Kim, do you have mentors?
I think the term personal board of directors is probably not the right term, but sure, there's people that I'm always going to when I'm considering important career moves. I have an executive coach, Tissa Richards, who's fantastic, who's been with me for multiple years and has seen me through different phases of my professional journey. She's not a lawyer. And I think it's important that you have people in your life that aren't just like from that particular skill set that you have, to be able to kind of look into your life or look into your professional overall package in a way that might be different than the way you see it. And so when I am very selective about the people I talk to about important things, like, that's a consideration. I do consider her someone that critical decisions are often pressure tested by her. Or when I think about people in my law firm, there are people there who are still at the law firm who I consider mentors. And my prior GC and the person who brought me out of the law firm to work for him, their name was Stephen Ballas and Stephen Chu, certainly have been influential in how I think about the craft of being a GC and being a lawyer. So, like, certainly owe debts of gratitude to them. All there's Those are some key ones I can think of. And so there's you asked about mentors, but I think something for young people to think about is the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. Some people can be both. And when I think about a mentor, that's someone who you're learning from them, you're learning your craft from them. A lot of critical decisions are being run through them, whether it's in the job you're in now or one later. But then a sponsor is someone who's in your organization who has the power to actually, like, get you to that next level. And, someone who's going to be in the room where decisions are made that impact your trajectory and your future, right? That could be really different skill sets, and one's not better than the other. They're both really important. So think about who it is that's going to help you become the better lawyer and the better business person, but who's also going to help you get there, and kind of be thoughtful about that.
Brilliant. And how do you suggest in 2025 younger lawyers can find the mentors? What's the right way? How to go about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's some organic ways and then there's sort of inorganic ways. I mean, in the law firm setting, my organic ways were I would make a concerted effort to not be at my desk all day, and I ate lunch in the open public lunch area. And especially when I first got there, then you just kind of see people outside of the context of their job. Like, they might comment on, "Oh, wow, are you a runner? What is this shoe you have on?" And that was actually, in fact, how I made one of the mentors, Lisa Addy, at my law firm, and we bonded over our shared passion for fitness and the places we lived. And from there is how I then developed a professional relationship with her. And I started doing work with her, and she taught me how to do real estate transactions. That's not something that went in the door thinking I was going to do, but with the blessing of my actual boss, that was something I did a lot of as a result. And so it's completely not contrived. But then there's ones where you might be more thoughtful and inorganic about the experience. So that might be actually reaching out to someone and saying, someone just did this to me at Relativity over the course of the last couple of years, was, "Hey, you know what? I really respect what you've done here and how you are an advocate for, like, people like me. And, I would love to, if we could go to lunch every month, every other month, I would love to just bounce my ideas off of you. Would you be up for that?" The worst thing people can say is no. And usually, most people have gotten to where they are and with the help of others. And I think it's people's obligation to then play that forward and to give back. Right. And so, and another way that to keep those types of inorganic opportunities live and relevant, because you are asking something of someone senior to you, is like kind of also the way you're providing value. It's like they might forward me some article that might, this person isn't a lawyer, but I was mentoring him, and forward me some article that impacted my life, or remember specific personal facts, or, oh, I remember that you like this type of food. Like, what do you think about this? Oh, here's a recommendation for this restaurant. And so that's where you take something that started out inorganic and make it feel like just making a friend.
Hmm.
And
Brilliant.
so, yeah.
Those are some beautiful pieces of advice. Thank you so much, Kim, again. Uh, in your career, leaving the current chapter with the relativity, what has been the most important chapter of your career and why?
I would say my most important chapter was my clerkship with Judge Letts.
Okay.
And for lots of reasons. So for one thing, that was a time when we were in a huge recession. Like the recession of 2008 decimated everybody, but it was a very challenging time to come out of law school and to be going through what is usually a untouchable process of going to a law firm for your second year, uh, I don't know, internship, or your when you're in a law firm year, and usually you just get a job from there and you call it a day and you're set, or at least that's what the echo chamber says. But this was a time when that wasn't a thing anymore, or getting non-offers, and everyone was in disarray. There's very few people that got to go the traditional proven route. And so for me, that meant having a wide aperture when I thought about what my first job out of law school was going to be. And typically these federal law clerkships are, and they are very competitive. So I'm not saying it wasn't that, but I went in a little bit of a non-traditional way too. And that was very relationship based. I had a relationship with a judge I did an externship for, who happened to be next door to the judge I clerked for, who happened to have a law clerk from my law school who happened to put my name in. So that's one non-typical thing that's not apparent from just looking at a resume. But the reason it's impactful from a career perspective is because that judge, as I mentioned, not being a litigator, having a very much a deal-making general counsel, M&A corporate background, he solved problems in ways that most mirror real life, as I found as a general counsel. So he brought to bear a business mindset onto federal court issues. And though that could often get him in some hot water with people that are very by the book, I saw things like him like calling parties into his back office, into the chambers, and saying, "What's really at issue here? I don't want to hear any of this, 2 hours of arguments on this anymore. I need someone to tell me actually what is actually at issue. Get to the point," right? And shell shock lawyers on both sides, kind of looking at each other like, "I made this brief. That my answer's in there. We've been arguing about this. I don't care." Usually what this means, folks, is that the two lawyers on each side are the winners and the clients are the losers, because how expensive is this? Is this a $50,000 brief we're arguing about? I think the answer is yes. And so then just watching him kind of sketch out, almost like being in a settlement agreement conference, where business people around and talking about, why does your business want to do this? What's important to me? Oh, that is interesting. And then coming to a very practical outcome. That was his approach. I'm not saying that's how he did all of his business. It was a rare occasion he did that, but still, like, it's that mindset of, I know there's certain structures and guardrails that we need to follow. They're there for a reason. But within the context of that, how are we creatively and efficiently solving this problem? And so I took that mindset into each one of my subsequent jobs. And it's so valuable as a general counsel, because no one appreciates you throwing the book at them. Businesses don't want to hear black and white, and they want to sit there and they want to push you. And it's your job to say, like, why do you want that? Like, what is that thing? Like, why is that important? And you just start peeling the onion back to see what that pearl in the middle that your board wants, or that your CEO wants, or what the other side wants. And that's how you can create outcomes, I think, that far outpace people that come at that with here's the black letter of the law.
Brilliant, brilliant. We spoke about a bunch of issues here, Kim. You also mentioned that when lawyers switch jobs, there are a lot of uncertainties involved here. Let's say a younger lawyer who is still maybe less late 20s, early 30s kind of lawyer who is switching jobs. People also make mistakes while switching jobs, which means there are speeding tickets works versus parking fines. So
Yeah.
when you're parked at one place for a long period of time, you think, oh, that lawyer has changed 5 jobs. He's now making much more than me. I have been paying the parking fine, whereas that lawyer might be paying a speeding ticket. So a speeding ticket better than a parking fine.
I don't think there's an answer to that. Yeah,
Okay.
no, because I'm a firm believer that there's no such thing as bad experience.
Okay.
And because I can't tell you how many times in an interview for a general counsel job, people want to know about what I did at the Dodgers as my first job out of law school. I mean, out of college. And this is a sales and hospitality job. This has nothing to do, in theory, with being a lawyer. But I think it has a lot to do with being a good business person because this is where you're learning the humility that it takes to serve the customer. This is when I was learning how to deal with some of the biggest celebrities in town and their children and making sure that I'm not acting like I am too good to serve popcorn to that person's child and go find it in Dodger Stadium. You know, is that why I went to Princeton? I'd say I arguably yes. You know, there's like jobs are not beneath you. This is just an ethos of life that I think is so critical to bring to especially an executive team of all high performing people in theory. And so speeding ticket versus parking ticket, I oh, I would say that be mindful of getting complacent. I think that to me is a core value that I think life's too short to just be doing something that you think is mediocre. And I don't mean that in a, is this business mediocre? It's you can tell. You can tell when you are just going through the motions and you are not utilizing your gifts to their utmost potential. And that is a disservice to your business and that's a disservice to yourself. So that's a lose-lose. And so everybody has such a different risk appetite for making changes and an appetite for change itself. And so that's why I don't think there's a right answer because there's nothing wrong with being someone that doesn't like change. But that person, I would say, if that's you, then you have to be particularly mindful about taking intentional inventory of where you are on your professional journey and whether that is, and I go back to what's success to me, whether that's meaningful by however you define meaningful. And that for a lot of people, that's not monetarily, and I don't think it should be. You had mentioned in your hypothetical, like people that are switching and they're getting more money each time. But I think that's often a fool's errand because if you're always chasing the next job for the purposes of money, you might be doing that without looking at what the actual substantive role is. And is that substantive role one that's going to be ultimately additive to what you're trying to build for yourself? And usually experience bears out for most people that the money follows from that because you might be the most burnt out rich person, but that's going to be obvious. And then you probably won't be getting to whatever the next meaningful thing is to you because you're too burnt out to do it. So I think my advice would be to be again intentional about how you're thinking about what that journey is, but equally not so fearful that that might be a mistake so long as you are actually taking inventory along the way and ensuring that your North Stars more you're kicking the can down the road at least in the general direction of that North Star.
Brilliant, brilliant. Kim, thank you very much. My last question to you would be, we are doing so much in our life, especially lawyers are doing too much in their lives as well. They have been trained to work hard. There's like ethics to work long hours as well. How do you want to be remembered when we leave this world? What legacy you want to leave?
Yeah, no, I I want people to say, and this isn't the same, this is no different professional or personal. I want to, for one thing, be leaving whatever it is better than I found it. And I want people to see me as someone who really made a difference. And I made a difference in other people's life and made a difference to whatever the thing that I decided to spend my time doing. And I think that would to me be the sign of a life well lived and personally and but also one where anything that I touch is something I've pursued with excellence and integrity. And I think that recipe is one that I hope makes for something meaningful on the professional front too. Because
This
yeah.
This is beautiful. This is beautiful, Kim. Thank you so much. Really loved all your answers. I'm sure somebody who's watching this show would appreciate how to for progress fast in your career, how important it is to have a growth mindset, having coaches, having gratitude, not just thinking about networking, but also about making meaningful, beautiful relationships in your career.
Yes.
How to change jobs? How to rise in your career? All those points and wisdom that you have given to us are truly beautiful points. Truly appreciate your time and wisdom today.
Thanks so much. It was so fun.